Nice.
You need to just go to
Alright.
Wikipedia and start there.
Can anybody on the other side, can they hear us?
They have this.
Anybody that's joining us virtually, can you hear us?
Yeah, because I'm very.
Okay,
Okay, thank you. We got that. Thank you.
good deal. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Captain David Reed. I'm the director. I'm the newly appointed director of the Public Safety Training Academy, our Training and Education Division. It's an honor to have everybody here in person and online. This is an extremely important part of not only your learning process about what Montgomery County Police does, but also the community engagement aspect. I've asked Sergeant Kate Brewer to come up. She is the sergeant in charge of our entry-level training division. She has been here since 2017 and has done a phenomenal job running our recruit classes. And she is just a wealth of knowledge. And like I said, I wanted her to be here to really answer all your questions. If you have any questions for me, feel free. But another step, if you haven't already done so, and I know we were talking about this, the Citizens Academy is a wealth of knowledge. It's 15 weeks, and I know that's a large commitment, but you can also do some weeks virtual if you just can't make it here on time. But it really dives in to what Montgomery Police is, all of our resources, how we do training. This is going to be a quick nuts and bolts about our training and gives you time to ask questions. But if you really want to dive into what we are as an organization, I highly encourage the Citizens Academy. We just had a graduation last week, and I love talking to people that have graduated from the Citizens Academy because they all have the same response. I had no idea what our law enforcement team does out on the road. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sergeant Brewer to introduce herself. Thank you all again for being here.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Some of you guys might know, but I actually sit with you guys. I'm an Expatriate member, so I'm the floating head sometimes. So sometimes also with not a camera on. But my name is Kate Brewer. I have been, when it was with the PAC, so how long?
2020.
2020. All right, so I make almost every meeting. I think last meeting might have been the first one I have not made in a long, long time. So, but please, if you guys have any questions ever about training, please reach out to me. Any other questions that I can help with, I'm more than happy to. I'm going to try really hard to share this screen. It should be easy because there's a button, but what I am going to try to do, oh no, that's not going to work. All right. Is that working? Yep. Why does it look like that on the screen?
It's in presenter mode, so is that what?
Not kidding. Sorry, guys. Okay, so my far more technologically advanced Captain helps me with that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a brief overview of the units that work at the Academy, some of the minimum requirements, some of what Montgomery County does. I'm going to go unit by unit. I ask that if you guys have a question, you just write it down, and then I want to leave enough time at the end for any and all questions that we have both here and anybody that's joined us virtually. There are a ton of units. Perfect. I got it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Kevin Reed. Appreciate it. Now that means you have to help any other technology issue that I have going forward. That's it. Sold. All right. So again, this is just a very brief overview. As the captain said, I've been here since 2017. I started on the in-service side, and now I work with recruit training. So I kind of got to see both sides of that. So I believe that I can answer a lot of questions on both the in-service and the entry-level side, as well as some of the other units. All right, so as I said, we're going to go over a few things, explain how people get instructor certifications. It's not just you come up and teach anything that you want, or instruct anything that you want. There is certain certifications that you have to get. We're going to talk about the mandatory training that we have to do and who sets those mandatory trainings, and then review each unit and again briefly explain some of the things that they instruct. So instructor certifications. So for point of clarification, we generally don't refer to ourselves as teachers because we don't have education degrees, so we refer to ourselves as instructors. Most of my family are teachers, so I'm very cautious with that. I always said it was a wonderful career to go into, but I just couldn't see myself doing it. Then I got a position up here. I was fortunate enough to get a position up here at the academy, and they asked what I do. I was like, I work with students. They think they won me over. I'm not sure yet, but I do really enjoy instructing. So anyway, so for the state of Maryland, instructor certifications. So the Maryland Police Correctional Training Commissions, you'll hear us say a lot, MPCTC, creates a minimum standard for instructors. So that minimum is a 40-hour course that they have created, and we have to follow certain guidelines to either attend that course or the guidelines that they set forth for us to host that course. They create and update any of those requirements for the basic instructor certification. So it's not as if I get my instructor certification and the first one you generally get is your basic instructor. Once I obtain that instructor certification, I'm not forever an instructor. Every 2 years, I must be evaluated instructing a particular course in order to, and I have to be evaluated by another instructor in order for it to be submitted to the state and then approved for another 2 years as an instructor. The MPCTC also maintains records and verifies that certain courses that we apply for, and we call it what's called a P number. It's just they have the P in front of a program number, that any of those programs, program numbers, P number courses are instructed by certified instructors. So we have to give them a list of instructors that potentially could teach that course. And then they verify that those people, those names that we have provided them are in fact certified instructors. There is one exception to that, and that is if somebody is a specialty in a particular area. So for example, a homicide investigator may not be an instructor, but they can teach a course related specifically to homicide investigations, provided that that course is less than 3 hours. Anything more than that, they must be an instructor. Right? The state of Maryland says we recognize that certain people are experts in certain areas by the nature of their profession or what it is that they do. There are also other specialty areas of instructions and certifications. So for example, I am a TASER instructor. I'm actually a certified master TASER instructor. In order for me to get that master TASER instructor, I had to go through Axon, who is the owner of the TASER device, and be certified by Axon. I then take that certification, provide it to MPCTC, and they accept Axon certification as a TASER instructor, and then they also provide me with a state instructor certification. So it's not enough that Axon has deemed me a master instructor. The state also has to recognize, and I have to submit my paperwork to the state as well. So I can't just go to one and say, well, they've said it's okay. The state still has to recognize it and have my paperwork on file. Okay. And that's for other specialties as well. All right, so minimum standards as far as instruction goes. The governing bodies that we have to follow include, as I've said, MPCTC, COMAR, Code of Maryland Regulations. Now, COMAR covers a lot of things in the state of Maryland. Generally speaking, MPCTC is going to get all of their guidelines from COMAR. All right, but MPCTC covers a lot of other things, which is why I list them separately. But generally, they're following COMAR's guidelines that they set forth for training. CALEA, Montgomery County is a CALEA certified agency. It's the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. So just as if universities and colleges are accredited, Montgomery County is also accredited. And we have just hit our, is it 25th year, which is a pretty unique mark to hit. But we are a CALEA certified agency. And again, there's a lot of things that we have to meet in order to be accredited. One of those major lifts is training. And we work in conjunction quite a bit with our CALEA auditor, for lack of a better term, that we have on site here. And she works with us and she's constantly reaching out saying, can you make sure you have this or send me this lesson plan so that I can prove to CALEA that we are instructing this. I would say at least 2-3 times a month just to make sure that we're staying within that accreditation. We also have certain things that we must meet for all Montgomery County government employees. There's a lot of training that new employees have to go through. So for recruit training, we make sure that all the recruits go through any training that Montgomery County government sets for all government employees. Then, of course, Montgomery County Police Department, if we have any new directives, any new standard of operating procedures, which is what we refer to as directives, any new training that Montgomery County Police Department deems that we need, we also go through that. And additionally, we have to obviously stay on top of any changing laws, any Maryland appeals court cases, any United States Supreme Court cases that have changed the way police affect their job, any research updates that we have or the research articles that we read, any trends that are currently going on, and any Montgomery County changes. All right, so the overview of the academy units. We have entry-level training, which currently I am the supervisor of entry-level. We have field training in the evaluation program, FTEP program. They also cover the cadet program and explorer program. I'm going to break these down in a second. In-service training for all the incumbent officers, our force unit training, our force training unit, our firearms training unit, leadership development, who also covers EVOP, which is emergency vehicle operations course. All right, so our entry-level training is a sergeant, a corporal, and then 5 instructors. So that's PO3, so that is the rank. PO1, 2, and then 3 is the senior ranking officer on the road. We also have a retired Montgomery County judge. He works not only for entry level, but he also works for in-service. So any law courses that are trained to our recruits is trained by retired Judge Mike Algeo. He is responsible for all constitutional law, criminal law that we cover for entry level, but also for in-service training as well. We also have Montgomery County Sheriff Sergeant and Deputy that work in our office. So we train obviously them as well. We train recruits from Montgomery County Sheriffs, Rockville City, Gaithersburg City, Tacoma Park, Park Police, Chevy Chase. Am I missing anybody?
Fire investigative unit.
Thank you. Fire investigative unit. We just graduated 3.
Is Metro ever connected?
They do not come through us. So Metro actually has to go through, they don't come through Montgomery County. All right, so the training that we go through, that the minimums that we have to follow is, again, MPCTC sets training TOs, what we call TOs, their training objectives that we must follow. Now, they just redid all of the training objectives, and there are 655. So it's great to go through all of them. I have them here, should you be really bored and want to look at them. But you can also go to the website, they're public. And if you'd like, I could give you guys the link to that if you want to go through it. And all it is just a list of things that must be taught, all right? Taught, and certain things must be tested, okay? And then when we get audited, which is every 2 years, we have to prove that we taught that thing and how we taught it. So we'd have to show them lesson plans and their PowerPoints. And then if we tested it, if it's required to be tested, we have to show them where it was tested, right? They set an overall minimum number of total hours. That minimum number is 750. We do not do minimum. We do our entry level, the course we just submitted for the next academy class is 1,052 hours that we submitted. So it's about 7 weeks more. Longer than the average. We do a 28-week program for them to graduate. So the class that just graduated, they came back, they're still here learning, okay, before they hit the road. It is a combination of classroom, physical training, defensive tactics, and of course, practical training. Everything's kind of woven in. We start in the classroom building kind of a base knowledge, and then we move to more practical things as we go along. As they learn more in the classroom, then we start applying it immediately as soon as possible to practical settings. Okay. Currently, we do just over 200 hours of law, constitutional and state law, which includes classroom and practical training. It's hard to pinpoint exactly how many hours because of the amount of practical training that we do with law. There's so much overlap with a lot of the scenarios that we do because every single scenario involves some kind of constitutional law and or possibility of criminal law. The reason I put this on here is because the national average For academy classes, for the number of law hours is 80, the national average. We find that significantly low because everything that we do every day involves the knowledge of constitutional law, specifically our Fourth Amendment. We also cover a whole slew of other courses, as you can imagine. I've only listed a few here, but we do fair and impartial policing, which is our bias training. It's a specific program put on by the company Fair and Impartial Policing that we are certified instructors in. Procedural justice. We've been doing procedural justice for 4 years now, and the new TOs that the state just created includes procedural justice. Previously, it was not a requirement. We've been doing it for 4 years. We don't put them through the entire crisis intervention course, but we have put just over 20 hours together for the recruits, and which does not include our practical setting with crisis intervention that they do. We do conflict management, community policing, mental health, et cetera. So again, this is just a brief list of some of the courses that we do, in addition to our staple courses. All right, so our field training and evaluation program, it's 1 sergeant, 1 corporal, and 2 officers. They're responsible for monitoring the on-the-job training, which occurs right after, obviously, they graduate from the academy and they're finished here in the building. Consists of a minimum of a 14-week program, but a maximum of 22 weeks. All right, so they have to meet certain guidelines and reach a certain proficiency, and they have to do that within the 22 weeks on the job. Field training officers, FTOs, conduct this training at the station level. So they'll be sent to their stations, their current assignments. They're sent there, and they're running calls with their field trainer, and every single call their field trainer is with them. All right. Those are, they volunteer for those jobs. Those FTOs volunteer for the job, but they must be endorsed by command staff, and they have to complete a 40-hour FTO school. They also have to complete required FTO in-service training. So they can't just, again, it's not just 40 hours and we never see them again. They do have to complete FTO in-service training as well. Also, that falls under the field training program is our Explorer program. That is students between the ages of 14 to 20 who learn basic police skills, potentially have an interest in law enforcement, although it's not a requirement to be an Explorer to have an interest in law enforcement. There's a strong focus on developing leadership and life skills. And these Explorers, they have over 1,000 volunteer community service hours a year as a result of being a member, being one of the Explorers. Our Explorer program is fantastic. There are Explorer competitions within the nation, and they do really, really well. This Explorer program is a wonderful program, and it has been for quite some time. We also have the Police Cadet program. This is full-time college students that are interested in a law enforcement career. Again, this is a little bit more geared towards those interested in a law enforcement career. They are paid part-time employees. They receive basic police instruction and are placed in rotating assignments within the police department. They're working now with them to bring, once they get their assignment, they bring them back. I believe it's once a month to do additional law enforcement training. So they use some of the instructors within the building to do various trainings, in addition to the training that they learn when they're assigned out to their locations. We currently are authorized for 25 cadet positions. And the hope is that these cadets then are in a position and apply to be Montgomery County police officers. We just graduated. I think we had one. I think there's just one in the most recent class. And he was an Explorer and then a cadet. And he was a fantastic recruit. We're certain he's going to do well when he gets out on the road. All right, our in-service training. I don't know why that started down there. All right, we have a sergeant, a corporal, and then 6 instructors. The minimum areas of instruction are set again by MPCTC, CALEA, COMAR, Montgomery County Government, County Police, current trends and tactics, law updates, and court cases. Each year, the in-service training team, instead of just copying the same training they do every single year, they break down their training and they start over and start fresh and create new training every single year. MPCTC requires a minimum of 18 hours of in-service training each year. This does not include firearms or TASER recertification. This is just in-service training. So this is just some of the other topics that are required and other topics that the department deems necessary to cover each year in service. We consistently exceed the minimum required hours by approximately 30% each year. So we're going over our 18 hours, the minimum 18 hours that are required of training. Training is a combination of in-person and online training. So some of the online training, when the state went to this years and years ago, the ability to do online training, the things that we put online were the one I can think of easiest, and I think all of us can agree, one that it's called bloodborne pathogens. So it's required every single year, and it is understanding the communicable diseases and everything that you could interact with people, how you can contract the diseases. That is something that we put online. The beauty of certain online training is we can cut out that classroom time, we can put it online, and the officers can go back and pull that online training. It stays in the online platform forever. So if they forgot something that was said, they can pull that training and look at it. We prefer in-person training to do as much practical training as possible because we interact with people, not a screen. So we prefer as much as possible that to put classroom stuff that is appropriate, that does not need as much interaction, we prefer to put that online as much as we can. The rest, we try to spend time in practical training and interacting with people and role players, officers that act as role players. So it's 2 days of in-service for the in-person, what we call one full day and one half day. It's just how it works out, and it's easier for training. In-person is a combination, as I said, of classroom and practical training. Montgomery County agrees to train the following agencies. Again, it's the Sheriff's Department, Gaithersburg City, Rockland City, Tacoma Park, Maryland Park Police, specifically Montgomery County, which is almost 1,400 officers. When, of course, all departments are down right now. When we have a full contingent, we're anywhere between 1,500 to 1,600 officers that we're training each year, when every department is fully staffed, which again is a sergeant, a corporal, and 6 instructors. Is a lot. Montgomery County also trains county security and animal services in various disciplines as well. There's certain responsibilities and trainings that they request, and we're responsible for that. All right, we have a force training unit, which is 1 sergeant and 3 instructors currently. They train de-escalation and use of force for our in-service courses, as well as for our entry-level training. It consists of both classroom and practical training, as you would imagine. They do ICAT training. They're certified ICAT instructors, which is integrating communications, assessment, and tactics. It is a type of training that PERF, if you've heard of PERF, has supported, and we follow that ICAT training as well. They do new user and recertification for TASER every single year. And our new, we have virtual reality training, which is through Axon. And while it's still growing, the virtual reality training is growing. We can use the virtual reality for TASER recertification, which has changed our cost associated with TASER because we don't have to pay for each individual deployment because we can do it virtually. And Axon allows for a certain number of virtual reality trainings. And then for deployments for the TASER, and then it's also Axon has a community engagement section of virtual reality, which is a very interesting concept where it puts the viewer, the person wearing the headset, in the both sides of the police officer, but also the citizen. So, for example, I think one is a veteran who is experiencing PTSD. So it's first as the officer interacting with that individual, and then it flips the point of view, and you see from the veteran's point of view what it's like to have an officer approach you and to answer the question. So it's a really interesting take on and use of virtual reality because your POV can be different. So we'll be using that virtual reality training and more trainings going forward. Force unit is also responsible for additional training for officers related to de-escalation and or use of force upon request. Same thing with shift training. If a shift says, hey, we want to work on additional kind of training specifically for our shift for any topic, they will cover that and develop training and create and host that training as well. They also created recently, and I just checked before I came here, they have additional ICAT training for the department. So what we call continuing education courses. They're hosting additional ICAT de-escalation training where officers can sign up for that training on a volunteer basis if they choose to attend additional training for that. We have a firearms training unit in the building as well. We were discussing earlier, we have an indoor range here. We also have an outdoor range still that we've had for decades at this point. But we have a very nice facility here, so we have an indoor range as well. The unit consists of 2 sergeants, 4 sworn police officers, and 4 professional staff, or 6 professional staff. They're retired officers. So not retired Montgomery County, but from different agencies. They are responsible for entry-level training, annual recertification for handgun, rifle, and shotgun. For the handgun recertification, MPCTC requires 1 qual and a 2-hour classroom each year. They require 30 rounds daylight, low light, and 30 rounds judgmental, which is just determining whether or not you have a shootable target. This year, Montgomery County is doing, in addition to the minimum requirement, an additional 450 rounds for training. For shotgun, the state requires 1 qual a year and a 2-hour classroom. So they do we do one 20-round qualification course, and this year we do an additional 30 to 50 rounds. For rifle, the state requires 2 quals a year, 1 each half of the year. So 1 in January to the end of June, 1 July to the end of December. You have to qual 1 in each half of the year. Montgomery County requires what's called a deployment assessment course, which must be completed successfully prior to the qualification each year.
What's the deployment assessment course? Sorry.
Kat Marie, do you have an answer for that?
The deployment assessment course, that is basically, we just started the program. You get the exact answer for it?
I don't have a rifle, so that's why I can't answer it.
So the deployment assessment course is basically shoot, no shoot scenarios. You're basically, it's not just standing online and shooting. It is giving you real world scenarios. You're moving, you're shooting, you're dealing with a buddy, knowing your backdrop. We drive home the 4 cardinal rules of safety, treat every weapon as if they're loaded, finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire, know your backstop. We drive these things home. And when they go through our instructor course, they have to have 100% or they don't pass. So we're very strict, and that's what that deployment assessment course is.
Thank you, Catherine. I just don't have a rifle, so I didn't want to, I could have made it up, but I didn't want to. So. All right, we also have a leadership development unit. Currently, it's 1 sergeant. Also that falls under there is 1 instructor and then 1 professional staff who's also a retired officer. Leadership development is responsible for supervisor in-service each year. Supervisor school, which is a 2-week course for new sergeants or sergeants that are about to get promoted, is first line administrator school, which is a 2-week course for new lieutenants or lieutenants who are about to be promoted. They're also responsible for what falls under the leadership umbrella is our EVOC instruction, so emergency vehicle operations course. So that's our driver instructors. So the EVOC instructors are responsible for entry-level training and also for our incumbent officers. So our incumbent officers have to do EVOC in service every other year. We have a track here, which is nice. We didn't have it. We had a track at the other facility, but we have a track here, skid pin here. It's nice to see. Our leadership development, which is Sergeant Mulaney, also creates and hosts our basic instructor school. And again, he creates that based on what the state requirement is. He manages our Citizens Academy that we talked about, that Captain Reed talked about. We also have a Spanish Community Academy as well. He organizes our leadership and police organization training, our LPO training, That is a 3-week course. It's a requirement for all supervisors to attend. And once all sergeants and above attend, then we open it up to other people in the department. It is I enjoy that course. I'm one of the instructors in that course. It's actually
Yeah, this is actually the room we use for that. And I've noticed some of you kind of looking around at stuff on the wall. We go over the leadership thought process and how everything, say your step one is you're identifying your problem, because every problem we know is unique. Then you go to 2. All right, what is happening with that problem? 3, formulate an action plan, talk to each other. And we tell them it's okay to be wrong, because you're then going to evaluate and assess what's going on. And then you may have to come back and now address the problem, because now you have more information. So we basically we go over that development matrix. So that way, when they go out there, we teach them not only to be a good leader, but also be a good follower, be a good communicator, be a good listener. So we really, and it's 1 week a month for 3 months. And we bring them in here. We have multiple instructors, and we really dive deep into, what a leader is supposed to be. And then we start incorporating what we do on our department in order to make it better.
We also have additional training. I have only listed a few things that we do for additional training. We call them continued education courses. So if all the training that we've listed that people do is not enough, which it's not, people enjoy coming back for training. I will say we never have a hard time filling any of these seats for these additional courses. So we have what's called Basic Investigator School. It's exactly what it sounds like, but it isn't just for people who want to be investigators. It's just a really good course to understand, because every police officer is an investigator to a certain level. It's a great course. I was fortunate enough to take it when I had a few years on. It's a fantastic course. Also, collision investigations. Our collision investigation unit is amazing, and they are certified to instruct both the basic and advanced level collision reconstruction. And we have people from all over the state that come to take that course, but we are able to offer it in-house just to our officers as well. We have financial crimes investigations. Again, we do the additional, as I said, ICAT and de-escalation training. We do additional defensive tactics training. So just outside the additional in-service, the regular in-service that we have, we offer additional defensive tactics training. We do effective writing, which is effective writing for report writing, effective writing for search warrants, effective writing in any capacity. We have health and wellness, which is something that shouldn't say is a new push. It's been a push that we've been doing for a really long time. We bring outside people when we can, but health and wellness encompassing everything. So everything that means, mental health, physical health, and wellness for the person. We do introduction to hate crime investigations is a course that we have put on, as I said, and many more. There's many, many, many more. I tried to pull up our training and find all of the ones that I could find, but we only had so much time. So I didn't want to bore you guys with too much.
I want to gloat on the instructors for just a second, because I don't think they get enough praise. They reach out to other organizations like social media. You'll see an officer involved shooting in Colorado or a situation in New Mexico. They will reach out. They will request that body camera footage. They will analyze that body camera footage, what lessons can be learned, and they incorporate it into our in-service every year. That's why when she said it's not just we're cutting, pasting from year to year, that is why, is they really go above and beyond to look at what's going on nationwide. So that way, when I get emails about a situation, George Floyd, for example, in that training scenario, what do you do here? We're already above it. It's like, and I'll give you another example, the vascular neck restraint, the choke code, when that was a big thing, and they're like, oh my gosh, we have to get rid of the choke code. Yeah, we did that 10 years ago, because we are constantly evolving our training to make sure that we're putting the best product we can out on the road.
All right. So I kind of threw so much at you guys because I wanted to leave enough for questions, because I imagine there will be. Yes.
So you mentioned something, just as background. So I'm a nurse. So this is the same thing nurses do. They assess, they plan, they implement, they evaluate, and circle back. And with that, how is these, there's like a million programs, I'm so impressed. But how is it integrated with academic pedagogy? Because you talk about, that training is not teaching, but it is. And how is that really integrated with real academics and pedagogy? And then part two of that is you talked about the glasses and what do you do for simulation? So you talk about getting the video and look at it in retrospect with real life people, but what do you do with simulation? Because that's huge, airplane pilots, nurses, doctors, all that.
So so we are teaching, but we just don't call ourselves teachers. So let me just clarify. Yeah. So,
Right.
but yeah, no. So for the second portion real quick, we, actually do things. So we have role players. So when I say we do practical training, we have,
Actors.
we use officers.
Right.
But yeah, so that, because as good as those goggles are, when they're not going to take I know nobody is actually coming at me. Although, has anybody put those on?
Yeah.
It feels real.
Right.
So,
We're actually starting to use them in nursing now. which is
yeah,
really
yeah,
good.
I think it's a
You know,
great
'cause if you
way
make
to
this
train.
thing,
Yeah, it's a great way to train. But it's nothing takes the place of somebody standing right in front of you or somebody walking towards you, or how do you handle that? So we actually do use role players. We have buildings outside, we call the cityscape. It's a building that on a very small scale, but looks like a school, looks like a single family home, looks like we have two-story townhouse, garden style apartment, single family home, a bank, a convenience store. So we can simulate almost anything that we want. And each scenario is written very intentionally, very specifically with training objectives and goals. So we have to pick our role players and the officers very specifically as to how they're going to do it, because we can only predict so much what we think somebody's going to react to what we're doing. But we still have a goal and an outcome that we want. So, but when we start the training specifically for entry level training, we start again, like in the classroom, and we start showing videos and we talk through videos. So very crawl, walk, run. So then we start taking them out of the classroom and starting to apply what they've learned, what they've seen on a video. And now they have to physically apply it, but only on small scale. And then as the weeks get on, then it's a full rep of something. So it is they're physically doing everything.
It's one thing to learn it in a classroom, but then you're adding in a little stress, because we may be playing out a scenario of a domestic violence. This is not Law and Order when you walk in and say, "Did you shoot that person?" Yeah, it was me. Okay. They have to figure out who's the attacker, who's the victim. And I call it controlled chaos, because they're in a protective environment and they're using their brain. They're going through all the clues that they see, and then they're implementing what they have. Just like as a nurse or a doctor, you're not just going to walk into a heart surgery. You're going to learn, you're going to evolve step by step. And that's what they do. And by implementing what we're training, the OODA loop, where they're assessing, evaluating, trying to figure out, and then that's where partners come into play. They'll take a step back on my contact and cover. Now I'm going to talk to my partner. Let's figure it out. Let's talk it through. Who's the assailant? Who's not? Because everything is not cut and dry. They're going to have to figure things out. And that is that controlled area that we want to get them at, so that way when they go on the road and there is no timeout, and they're under a lot of stress and they have to make split-second decisions, they're a little bit more comfortable in doing so.
So how do you integrate with academics at all?
And what do you mean? How do we?
Do you ever consult a professor at University of Maryland?
With the judge mainly, because of so we have to make sure that everything follows the legal standard is the main thing. Right? So we, when we're talking about scenarios, we do it from that standpoint. We did just hire he actually started today. He is a curriculum development is one of his roles. And so he's something we will use to bounce ideas, to help us with research, because any research that we use, we are very adamant that the research is either published, right, in peer reviewed and published, but published in journals, right, like in America. Yeah, exactly. So, but peer reviewed is the main thing, that it's it has already been peer reviewed and then published in American Psychology, or but yeah, we're pretty specific about making sure we're relating it to specific research that we do now. Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, so there is a person that has just come on board, that's basically a curriculum development expert or advisor.
Yes, and and he will help us with some of the curriculum. Yes, sir. Yes. Ma'am.
Okay, I kind of have two questions. The first question is, I noticed that even for the basic training, there were maybe 20, 25 people tops who do that training for such a large cohort of officers. So how do you make sure that the class sizes are kept to a point where they're manageable? What opportunities are there for, small group discussions, independent thinking, like what, because, as a tutor myself, like I think it's very important for people to be able to learn things in small groups at times. So is there any opportunity for that? How are they formatted? Like, how is that overall experience formatted? Is it like, I know there's plenty of like in classroom scenarios, in the academy scenarios. I guess what I'm trying to say is like, how are there, how?
I think I understand your question.
Yeah, how
So-
is the material conveyed in a way that is effective with such a big class size?
So to your first question, we rely a lot on adjunct instructors, and Sergeant and I were just talking about this today through our allied agencies. Yes, we train the allied agencies, but they also supply us instructors when needed. And like she said, patrol procedures when we need, we don't just take anybody off the road because we want to train them in that scenario. And we rely heavily on our adjunct instructors. I could quadruple my staff and not have anybody else and still wouldn't have enough. So we rely heavily on the adjunct instructors that come off the road to really help us to make sure that we give each individual candidate the best training possible.
So a lot of classroom training is what it is, right? So we do a lot of, so for example, so I'm one of the ones that leads procedural justice training. And we have a couple classrooms leading up to it, but then we have a tabletop group participation for it. So they break out into groups for that. So sometimes we do group work when we can.
Okay.
When there's certain, we have what's called rotations, and they have, I want to say 4 different rotations, and we split them in 4s in groups of, and I'm sorry, so it's a 4-week rotation. They go to different disciplines. So they're broken down into 4 groups.
Okay.
So that we're operating, so from instructor to student ratio is much, much smaller then. And generally when there are rotations, we have more instructors.
Yeah.
So we even have more instructors to students. Sometimes, I wouldn't say it's ever 1-to-1 because that's sometimes a lot depending on the discipline, but we have a lot more instructors. And again, we cut that class size when we can. Sometimes classroom is just, unfortunately, it's not the best, but yeah, we do when we can. We break them into groups. Yes, sir.
Yes, after you do all this training and, test them and everything, and at some point they go out on the road and they by themselves. And
They're not by themselves.
no, I mean,
Like after
away
the
from your
training.
training.
After
the training.
Work training. They do make mistakes when they go out. That's not what I'm getting at. The question is, do you use those real live mistakes that they make? And of course, they do more training, come back. But do you integrate that into your training? The live mistakes that are made by the police. What went? How did they not do it? Why did they? Or how did they not react the way that their training had already mandated them to
So
do so?
that's a very good question. And I think unfortunately it's not an easy answer, right? So sometimes, because we have to look at the person too. So the first thing we would always do is look at the training first to see, is it a training issue where we talk as a staff? Is this something where we didn't do this in training? Is it a failure in training? Is it something that we need to revamp? Something that we need to do that we missed or didn't train enough or should train more, right? Or is it an individual issue? Because let's look at doctors, for example, right? So is it an individual issue with that doctor, or is it the training that they received? And it's just the same way in this profession. So we would look at the event And is it an event that could have been prevented because training should have been more in that area? Or is it an event that there was something else going on? So it's not an easy answer. I don't think we can say every single time we say, let's look at training. Let's, we're always going to say, if it's a big enough event, we're always going to say, let's look, is it something that we could do, especially if they're newly use, right? Or is it an event that's so rare that happened that it was just something we had never trained before because it's such a unique situation? Because inevitably, and I think we can all say, I think maybe the first week you get cut loose, you're on call you've never run before, never heard before, and you're just like, what the heck? So what is this? But I think it's just not an easy answer. So I would say, yes, we're always, if it's a major event, we're always going to look, is there something that we should have trained and could train? Is it something that we should address in entry level and also in-service training? And or is it something that the individual, was it unique to that situation? There's so many things at play that we have to look at.
So to dovetail on that, is there a mechanism to do a peer review oversight with no harm, no foul? You report it, your head's not going to get chopped off.
So let me jump on it real quick.
Yeah.
So anytime we have revamped our use of force procedure. So anytime other than compliant handcuffing, which like I said, says, yes, I committed that crime, and then they put their hands behind the back. Any use of force from that officer, use of force has to be done. That use of force is viewed by their sergeant. Once they deem that they look at the use of force, they look at the report, and if it drives up or if there's any problems with it, they can kick that back and say, I don't like this, you need to check this box, that whatever it needs to be done. Once that's approved by the sergeant, then it goes up to their lieutenant. Lieutenant then looks at everything. After it's reviewed by the lieutenant, it goes up to the director or the captain. The captain then looks at it. Once it is checked off there, it goes all the way up to the executive officer for Patrol Services Bureau. Executive officer looks at it. So if we see something, and as we know, there's many ways to walk a line. You can walk around, you can walk straight. So there's many ways to deal with a problem. But like she said, you may have a young officer. So if we see something that in the eyes of the community, they may like, I question how they do that. Then what we'll do, talk to the sergeant or talk to the lieutenant. Hey, talk to your young officer, give them a little bit more experience, or talk to them in the scenario saying, hey, next time try this. And a lot of the times they simply don't know what they don't know. Just like somebody starting a new job. If you're a new welder, you're not going to know how to weld until you actually get in there and start welding, even though you went through a class. So what we do is we try to stay above that, and we have many eyes always looking at their use of force videos. And then we'll go up to somebody, because listen, we're all human, okay? Sometimes emotions get into play, and sometimes we can always do better, okay? But we always are evaluating all those cameras and trying to help them improve their techniques on how they do things.
What was your question about peer review? Just so I understand that.
But is there a peer review kind of thing? Like what he was saying, you make a mistake. So I'm just going to go back to the hospital. We have something called a near miss. So you can call the hotline and you can say, you know what? I know Francisco may have done something. I don't know if he had a problem or not. And, I'm not held to this standard, and I'm not like, no retaliation against me, and no retaliation against him either. So it goes to a peer review, and not up the line, which I hear you saying, it goes up the line. There's not a peer. Yeah. And peers look at it and say, for instance, he made an honest mistake, and this person is not, retaliated against. But that's why I'm wondering, like, going back to what Arthur was saying, is there a way that you say, like, I know I made a mistake, can they honestly admit it? And with that, can they say, you know what, I think I need another training on.
Oh, absolutely.
But are they going to do that?
Well, and that's what we have Rule 6, our intervention policies, where officers, if they see something going on, or they have to intervene, and we encourage that with these officers. But also our supervisors are out there on the road, and we talk to them all the time. If you see something, like I've gotten several emails saying, hey, this like report writing, still a little bit shading on his report writing. He's not being really conclusive in the evidence he's seeing. Little things. So I said, absolutely, bring them back. You know, we'll give them more training on that aspect. So we're constantly evolving, but that's where also the in-service comes into play. We don't just send them out on the road and say, hey, have a great career. They're constantly coming back. They have to take tests in service. They go and do training. So we're constantly evolving that.
I think they always can reach out to us, whether or not I know that they're doing it as often. We don't have what you're explaining as a specific peer review. Maybe it's a pipe dream saying it, but I think people are fairly confident. Now I'm a supervisor, so it's a little bit different, but I think people are fairly confident, comfortable coming to us because of the relationship we've established, especially in service where it used to be a different atmosphere than it is now. I'd like to think people are more comfortable saying, hey, can you teach this? Or can you go over this? Or, hey, we want it, because our shift training is a big thing that we used to do a lot more of. Unfortunately, with staffing, it's really difficult. So they would say, hey, we're going to come as a shift and we want to train. And we'd say, great, you tell us what you want to do and we'll craft what you want. And a lot of times what we found was that was kind of around 1 or 2 people on the shift that like, hey, we think as a group, we need more of this or we need more of that. And it was kind of the way they did that. It's just difficult now shift training and staffing. But yeah, I think it was just done in a different way, but we don't have specifically what you're talking about, unfortunately. Yes, ma'am.
So it seems like, you know, there's obviously a lot of emphasis on the idea of the chain of command, because this is a food sourcing, right? And I think in my experience as an educator, one of the most valuable things to learning is the freedom to inquire, to investigate, to question independently. How do you make sure that you're cultivating that atmosphere in the classroom so that, you know, recruits and incumbent officers feel free to ask questions, challenge ideas? How do you reconcile that with sort of the hierarchical nature of the police department?
Yeah, so again, in service, it's very different. I think, so we've had for years, a anonymous sheet where you could fill out what you thought about each training. They've advanced it. It's just a QR code. You can go and you can still stay anonymous and fill out, like, this is what I thought about training. And let me tell you, people do not hold back when it's anonymous. I will say that people have been overwhelmingly positive. They take the opportunity to say, and more people are taking the opportunity to fill it out, because what people started finding out was that we were reading them every single day. So when I was on the in-service side, I would collect them at the end of the day. You could leave your name if you wanted to, you didn't have to. And I would come back and my whole staff was sitting there. I'm like, all right, guys, we're good. Have a good day. And they're like, no, can you read them? So it was like story time. We'd sit there and read each one. And we got really good feedback about, hey, can you consider this training? And if enough people said it, we're like, we need to integrate that into training next time. So it just encouraged more and more people to fill them out. So we found out that every day and in service, and they're still getting it, they're getting about 80% of the people fill out those feedback sheets. And again, sometimes they're not great, because it's hard to read somebody say, not your best work today. Yeah. And they don't say it that nicely, right? They'll just tell you, they don't care. But that's what we need. Now for recruit training, it is different, right? It's a little bit different. Now we do have counselor instructors. So they go to those instructors if what we say that if they have questions, they have like a guidance counselor instructor, and they make themselves available. We also have, so that it's somewhat removed from myself and the corporal, although we do make ourselves available. And while we do have a paramilitary, we do want the recruits to feel that in an emergency situation, they go, whatever it is, whether it's in the classroom or outside of the classroom, that they go. So it is a little bit different for recruit training. We can only foster as much as we can, but we have worked well with our peer support team that we have. And they come in once a week, and removed from us, we step outside and we tell them they're in room 122 today, and they come once a week and we leave. And then they go and can anonymously talk to them about anything. And if it's something, especially if it's something like pivotal, they'll encourage them to talk to either one of us if it has to do specifically with training, or they just say private, because that is a private communication with them. So not the best answer, but it's an answer.
Yeah, you have a question
I
online.
did. Okay. Who's next? Sheree? Ms. Branson?
Hi,
Yeah, so here's my question is in the training, how do you determine whether someone has actually taken it in? I mean, do you have a test at the end of it? I mean, what has to happen, you know, in each class for you to be able to determine that someone has, you know, they understand and they're able to apply what they've been trained on?
Yep, so as the captain explained, for in-service, there are tests at the end of each in-service for each full day and half day. If it's a physical component, they have to be able to demonstrate. So the biggest one I can think of is CPR. We can't certify somebody in CPR unless they can properly demonstrate CPR. We follow AHA rules, American Heart Association rules for that. So they have to be able to demonstrate what it is that we have set forth for the training objectives that we submit to the state. For recruit training, we have 18 areas of instruction that are tested. So on a daily basis, I don't know those one-off courses that we can, but we have exams and quizzes, continual quizzes and exams that, again, 18 areas evaluated that are exams, both practical and written, combination of practical and written, and then quizzes throughout as well.
Talk about if they fail. Talk about if they fail.
Yeah, so for recruit training, if they fail, which is anything below a 70, if they fail, again, whether it's practical or whether it is written and it's one of the critical areas, they go to remedial training. And that remedial training is with the instructor. It's more of a, depending on how many people, if there's more than one that failed, it's more of a one-on-one. They review the topic. We spend a certain amount of time with them on each, whatever the discipline is. And when they have, when a certain amount of time is spent on them, then they get a chance to retake that exam. And again, if it's a critical area, when they retake the exam, they have to get a 70 or above. For recruit training, if they don't pass that remedial, then they are removed from recruit training.
What's the pass rate?
We average from the beginning of the academy to the end of FTO, about 25% is our failure rate. From the beginning of the academy to the end of FTO.
75% possible.
Yes.
So is
Yes.
does the remedial take place after the first attempt, or is it like 2 attempts, and if you fail both attempts? So
For Montgomery County Academy, you take the one attempt and you fail, and then you get one attempt, one remedial attempt. Yes, sir.
or remedial and then a retake.
You get the remedial training, yeah, and then one retest. Yes, yes.
And this is where I kind of come into play, and Sergeant Brewer and I talked about this, is we drive home that a lot is expected of the recruits. And we talk about discipline, and now they have to go home after every day and study everything they've given them, because the train is moving down the track. We're not going to stop our training because one person has failed and now everybody is waiting for that person to catch up. That's why we give them plenty of time to ask questions. We have our instructors go over everything in detail with them. We have them take notes, and then we tell them, go home, study, get ready for the next day. So a lot is put on them, but we talk heavily about a lot is going to be thrown at you, and you have to stay disciplined and stay on top of this in order for you to pass.
We also, for entry-level training, don't do block training. We haven't done block training in years. We do interleaving training. So if you read the studies, it's better than block training because you don't learn one thing and then you forget it, right? So block training is, I'm going to do constitutional law for 2 weeks and then I'm never going to touch it again. So we don't do that. We do interleaving training. So it's multiple things a day. So you might have constitutional law Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then the next week you have it every day that week, but you also have other stuff too. You don't have just, the longest class is 2 hours at a time. And then you go to another class. You might have traffic law, you might have report writing, you might have ethics, you might have another class. So we don't do block training. So again, the research has shown over time that for retention, block training is the worst type of training to do. So we're fortunate because we have staff on site that we don't have to do block training. A lot of agencies that are smaller call people in, so they'll stay there for 2 weeks and teach their block of instruction and then leave. So we're fortunate where we have in-house instructors, so we don't have to do that. And the retention of that information research those is much better. Research
Let
those.
me ask you,
Yes,
just a sort of light on home. When I'm looking at something like the entry level training or it program, you all have this like sergeant, corporal, or instructor. What are the different roles of these people? From a sergeant, a corporal, or the instructor. What's the difference?
So as the sergeant, I'm the supervisor of the corporal and the instructors, but also of the entire, all the recruits. So I'm their first supervisor, if you will, that they report to, and then the lieutenant and then the captain. But I also train certain areas as well. So depending on my certifications or what courses are occurring, I train. So I do procedural justice. I teach intro to community policing. I do various courses throughout the academy, not as much as the instructor. So we have an instructor that is responsible for report writing, and he covers the report writing instruction. We have instructors that cover defensive tactics, and that is their area that they cover. Instructors that cover physical training, and they have certifications in that area. So the areas of instruction that they have, and it's their responsibility to maintain those certifications, to attend training, to update their certifications, to update their knowledge on that area of instruction as well. So it just depends on what is happening that day and what instruction and what certifications that they have.
Would you also say that you're kind of the trainer of the trainer, so to speak?
No, I wouldn't, because I don't train them, right? So
You don't, and part of your role is not to train the corporal.
no,
and the others.
no,
They
just
get
to
that
oversee.
trainer someplace else. You just
Correct.
oversight.
That's correct. Yeah, they do. Yes, that's right. Yes, sir.
What is their incentive? Other than, altruistically loving it, right? You
Yes,
guys love this.
absolutely.
Do they get paid?
There's no extra pay.
This is all volunteer.
Yeah, so there's no
And-
extra
And
pay.
I'm glad you noticed that, how short our staff is compared to what these officers train. And we have to have the very best up here. These are all volunteers, but it's a competitive process. They go with what's called through a PVA, a position vacancy announcement. Officers come up here and do temporary assignments. They want to do temps to get to know the training and see if this is something they like. And when officers come up there, they are sometimes they're overwhelmed because the amount of responsibility we put on them. But up here, we have to delegate. It's like I oversee everything, the training and education division. I have my right hand, who's Lieutenant Jensen, my deputy director in the back. Now we have our new civilian, a deputy director, that he's going to come in and he's going to help us evolve that curriculum. And so we get together, we have staff meetings weekly, and we look at how we can evolve this. We delegate to these officers that are certified. Do you need updated training? Do you need this? And like I said, they're constantly evolving. Say, hey, there's some great training in New Mexico that will help us. So we'll try to get funding to send our officers there. So we're constantly trying to evolve so that way they can go out and better do their job.
I guess there's one more question based on that. That's sort of the elephant in the room, right? Like you both mentioned that training evolves to respond to incidents that have happened across the country. Do you think the training will evolve in the wake of the recent shooting of Bishop Jones? How do you think that the training will evolve in light of that? Do you have any prognosis on that?
So I think the difficulty with I don't know how to delicately answer this other than to say I don't think that would happen here. And maybe that's I hope that's not ignorant of me, because there's nothing that we train that would. I don't know that we have to change. We just have to continue what we're already doing to ensure something like that doesn't happen.
Let me just jump in real quick. So a lot of people think law enforcement, we're all trained the same. When they go to that class, they're all taught the same way. That's not true. And when I say that in what Sergeant is getting to, that she doesn't think that would happen here, is because we put a lot of emphasis on training, and I'm hopefully we've shown you this. Now, is there a possibility of situations to happen on the road? Absolutely. But this is where we are so really putting a lot of apples in the cart for community engagement to open up our doors and said, this is what we're doing. This is why the Citizens Academy is so great. It's because we don't want people to think we're hiding behind closed doors and don't want people to see what we're doing and stuff like that. We want to open those doors. But at the end of the day, we have human beings being police officers. And here's the thing too, is like a lot of times when we have the Citizens Academy and we will put them in with the Milo system or the VR headsets, and we put them in shoot, no shoot scenarios. And the guy comes around the corner with a phone asking for help, and then they shoot him because they're just thinking they're in a police environment where deadly force is going to have to be applied. And they're like, wow, I had no idea. I was so ramped up. I got all this information that I was going to this call. And so they don't understand. But training is key. It all comes back to training, and we understand that. And we're not saying a situation is not going to happen, but we do what we can to give the very best product on the road. So that way our field training officers, again, come in for more training and they submit applications. The command staff go through the field training applications. They have to sign off on that before they send them up to us. We go through with the FTUP supervisor, and myself and Lieutenant Jensen go through. That's a good candidate for this officer. Doesn't have enough time on the road to be a good FTUP. Just like a nurse, you know, when you're out of nursing school, probably not the best trainer, you know, but somebody that's 10 years on that has been around the ER would be a good trainer, and that's what we're looking for. But all training is not the same, and we have seen that time and time again.
Yes.
So this is a very specific, well, first of all, thank you very much for your service to the community. And this is a very specific question. And I understand when a police officer is forced to use deadly force, he's trained to continue shooting until he's neutralized the target. And what's not clear to me, or the threat,
Right.
It's not clear to me, what does that mean, neutralize the threat?
So it's not really neutralize the threat either, isn't the so you have to so you address the threat. So let's say you choose to use deadly force. It's until their threat is no longer a threat, essentially, is what you're doing. So I can't tell you exactly what that is because it's different every time, right? So if I'm by myself and a person, these tables aren't here, and it's just me and this person, and for some reason I can't get out of the room, and the person is charging at me with a knife. So I fire my firearm until the threat is no longer a threat. If the person is on the ground, I can now get a certain distance. If he cannot move physically, he can't stand up, then I can get a certain distance away from that knife. But if that same person has a gun and he can still move his arm, he doesn't have to stand up to use that gun to still be a threat to me. So it's very dependent. It's situationally dependent. It's environmentally dependent. It's dependent on a lot of things. So it's until that threat is no longer a threat.
So, I mean, and the reason why I'm asking this is because the scenarios that we've seen and have been in the press is basically an officer firing handguns. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's the question to the normal person is like, was that necessary? And so, you know, is it part of the training to just continue shooting? If let's say the person has a gun, you shoot him once. He hasn't dropped the gun, so you continue shooting him until he's in the ground, obviously. And when do you decide, okay, that's enough?
So there's so much that plays into that.
Yeah.
I'm going to nerd out a little bit for a little second. So there's something called perception reaction time, right? So you see with your brain, not with your eyes, right? So your brain sends information to the back. Your eyes take in information, sends it to your brain. Your vision center is back here. And then it processes what it sees, and then it tells you to react, right? Perception reaction time. So sometimes you're sending that message to pull the trigger, and it appears that that person's already down. Well, that message to pull the trigger has already been sent based on what you saw. So the time it takes for the average person to see, the time it takes for anybody to see something and process it is 0.25 to 0.3 seconds. There's nothing we can do to really change that. All right, it is 0.25 to 0.3 seconds, which sounds like that's super quick. But the average officer can shoot 4 rounds in a second. 4.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. you.
Yeah, 4. I mean, really, an avid shooter can shoot more than that, but the average shooter can shoot 4 to 5 rounds in a second. So when you take that information and kind of lay it on top, you really have to, that's why body worn cameras are more beneficial than not a lot of times, because we can slow it down. And that's what a lot of times those investigations do. They really, really slow it down to determine when was that trigger pulled, because then you also have to travel time of the round and the travel time. So it seems as if potentially they're shooting after the person is on the ground, and they might be, but they might have already sent that message to pull the trigger. And that person is on the ground, but the message was sent when they were still standing, or then they were still falling, or when the arm was moving. There's just so many things at play that have to really be considered. And with the benefit of body worn cameras and also other cameras that are also being, people videotaping everything, you can slow it down and really kind of start to. But that perception reaction time does have to be considered when doing it.
And also, wasn't there a point where, I guess conversely, there were also training scars as well? Because depending upon what police agency you might have trained in,
There used to
there
be, yeah.
was double tap.
It was
double
always
tap,
that, and
double
stop,
tap.
2 and
rounds
stop,
in 3
2 and
seconds.
stop. Yeah.
And then sometimes officers are finding themselves in critical incidents, and they've been trained to double tap.
Right.
But
It
it
goes
may
back to
take
that
more than
firearms
2
training
rounds.
question you
Yeah.
asked earlier. We don't do that anymore.
But it may take more than 2 rounds to
Right.
stop that
Right.
threat. And if you're
Right.
only trained to shoot 2 rounds,
You can't train
Then
an
you
officer
lose that.
to fire 1 round and assess if he's still, because again, this is not the movies. You've got adrenaline pumping through the body. We have seen videos where somebody's been shot 3 or 4 times, but he's still firing because adrenaline is still pumping. So that's why until that person is no longer a threat. And then in the environment, like Sarge said, that's a huge factor too.
now, do you guys have a specific use of force matrix that you train?
So we don't have a matrix in the sense of I have to first try this before I try that.
The hierarchy rule.
Yeah, so we don't have that, because if somebody produces a gun, I don't have to say, hold on, stop.
Yeah, you don't have. to
Right.
use-
Yeah, so we don't have that.
Okay.
Yeah, most departments do not have
So
that.
it's really just judgment shoot based on the incident and what the circumstances present.
It is, but we train. So again, with that perception reaction time. So the perception 0.25 to 0.3 seconds, we can't shorten that time. That's just normal human being, right? Gentleman by the name of Dr. Mark Green, if you care to research it, did a lot and wrote a lot of stuff in it, really, as it relates to driving and collision reconstruction is really where he started to kind of start to research that. But it's the reaction time. So then it takes another second to react. So now we're 1.25 seconds, right? What we try to train is that 1 second. We try to reduce that as much as we can. So that's where the training is, but you can never reaction is never going to be action, right? We can only react to what we see. We can't get in front of it ever. You can just never really get in front of it. You can only react to what you see. The person we're dealing with always knows what they're going to do. We can only react to it. So it's what we try to do is in recruit training and also in service training, we try to create these practical scenarios where we try to overload the frontal lobe, because that's where all the critical thinking happens. So we kind of put that stress on it, and we overload it in the sense of making sure that even under the minimal stress that we can put here, because we can never replicate on the road stress, we can never replicate a fight for your life here. We just can't. But when that stress kicks in, that's when you're going to start kind of certain things start happening physiologically to you. So we try to train that. We try to minimize that 1 second as much as possible. We try to reduce that. That's where we try to buy our time, because really it's 1 to 3 seconds to react. We try to buy the time there down to 1 second for reaction. So we do a lot of what we call isolation drills and movement drills and stuff like that. And we train not just to shoot, but also hard recognition drills, so that it's not that you're always seeing a gun, because the reality is, even though they changed our use of force reporting, so our use of force reporting is different. So it's going to look like our use of force skyrocketed, but you have to really look at the numbers. But we really use force less than 0.5% of our interactions, right? So that's generally the national average too, less than 0.5%. It's closer to 0.25% of all police interactions result in any level of force. So we try to train the same way, right? That means we do have to train for those shoot scenarios, but we don't overtrain that, because that's not what people are going to get into all the time. So we don't want to create that training squad. Sometimes we call it a training reality, right? Because you create it, right? So we want to make sure we're not creating those. So we do hard recognition drills. So it's not always a gun or a knife that's strong. It's something else. So we're forcing people for that hard recognition.
And is that part of the practical training that people can fail?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And is it typical that they fail the practical versus the written more often or not?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's a stress overload.
Mhm.
I think it has a lot.
Other than failing the practical, assessment, can you say, whoa, I see there's something wrong with John Doe over here? The only way they can fail is failing the practical.
It has to be
correct?
objective. It has to be objective.
I-
All of our evaluations have to be objective. We can't be subjective.
I would think too, what kind of weapon that the person, but say just using guns, if someone has a handgun shooting, and you might think different about what is a neutralizing threat is different from if they have an AR-15 or something.
Absolutely.
You might think you might have to just take that person out, because when they shoot, whatever, they can go real fast.
Right. And if the lieutenant is back there and has a knife, but I'm here, you just got to go over all those tables. And if you guys aren't here, do I even need to be in the room? We train that too. We train the intermediate barriers. And if the only people in the room are myself and the lieutenant, nobody else is here and she has a knife, why am I in the room? Get out the room, right? We train that quite a bit too. We stay, and there's a lot of things we need to do to address, maybe we need to make sure she's okay, but can we do that on the other side of the door?
Ms. Branson, you have another question?
Yes, please. So I'm wondering, do you have a training class that talks about the stresses of the job and how to deal with that?
So I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was actually we just got nationally recognized for our new health and wellness program that with 2 years now?
Yep, about 2.5, 3 years.
About 2.5, 3 years. We work closely with our stress management team. We have 2 psychiatrists that work on that team, and in service, we go deep into mental health, PTSD. We have gotten out of suck it up. We have gotten out of, deal with it. When we have our class on mental health and wellness, we bring all the instructors in the back of the room. So that way, and there's like anywhere from 6 to 9 instructors we bring in. So if we hit a nerve with an officer where he or she needs to walk outside, we have an instructor go with them to talk to them. We have our peer support team, our stress management team, and we talk all the time about if you need help or if your family needs help, if there's a situation, please. And we talk to the officers too, as a beat partner. If Sergeant Brewer and I are on a beat and we talk to the officer, she knows me better than anybody. And if she sees there's a problem with me, do not be afraid to go to your supervisor or go to somebody to say, hey, you might want to take a look at Captain Reed. He just, I don't know, he's angry. I don't know what's going on. And then we can give them the help they need. So I'm very proud, and we're not nowhere near where we need to be, but we're building on that program.
How does that work prior to shift? Like,
But that is in the in service. What about in the entry level?
Yes, ma'am, we do. We have our stress management comes in the beginning. They come in week 1, I believe, or week 2. And our stress management talks to them. We offer peer support once a week. And again, they're removed from the instructors. They talk privately to them. And they're allowed to go, and we don't follow them. We don't know who's going, so that they can do it anonymously. And then at the end of the academy, so we do that throughout every week. And then at the end of the academy, we do another one again with them, and we do it's peer to peer. And we have an instructor that tells his personal story, and the recruits have been interacting with that instructor the entire time. So it's a very impactful class that they get to go through, and that they hear his story. So it's been pretty beneficial, and we got really good feedback from them for that.
So
Yes, sir.
I know it's unique being police officers, but what mechanisms do you guys have in place for pre-shift? Someone's coming to work, ready for their shift, they have a stressful event, and we don't really, well, we would hope people wouldn't be so task oriented that they would still go out into the community. What happens?
Yeah.
You guys have any mechanisms in place where somebody could just call in pre-shift and say, hey, this is what happened, not gonna make it in today, gonna take leave. that type of
Always.
thing.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
absolutely.
always. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, anybody can call in and let a supervisor know. If somebody called me and told me, yep, we got it, we'll figure it out. If we're short, we'll still figure it out. But we would want to make sure that they're okay too, right? So we might, because sometimes people call, being alone might not be the best thing. So we would make sure that they're okay still. And then we also have our peer support. But as the captain kind of stressed, the people you work with those are the people you get close with, just with any profession, right? The people you work with sometimes become more, spend 40 hours with them, spend more time than you do sometimes with your family, unfortunately, right? But in this profession, you share a lot of things. And what we talk about in our mental health is that the average person experiences maybe 2 events in their life that really negatively impact them, like two major incidents that potentially they could experience PTSD from. The average police officer, about 800 to 900. That they're sometimes by proxy, but that they're there for, and that they're experiencing go through. You can only compartmentalize for so long. So we're trying to break that stigma of saying you have to compartmentalize. It's just not, you just can't all the time, right? Some things are going to creep in. So I think we're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, on average, there's 187 officers a year that commit suicide. I've had one of the officers that I went through the academy with committed suicide. I'm also our honor guard commander, so I deal with families that officers have committed suicide. And when they started this program, I was like, absolutely, put on the gas pedal, whatever we can do. So, and like Sarge says, when officers give us feedback, hey, have you thought about this? Hey, you thought about this? We have officers that went through traumatic incidents and see what we're doing and volunteer to come and talk to other officers. Man, those are so impactful, because it's not if the what if scenario. This is the officer that walked in the shoes, went to Harvard Grace, that we have a good relationship with them. I mean, they go all over the nation and bring officers and firefighters in. I believe he's a retired firefighter. Is that right? Yeah, retired firefighter, and get them the impact. We don't want them to think, oh my gosh, I'm gonna lose my job if I have a problem. We want to help them. We want to help them be better so they can be better for the community. So those are very impactful, and they're really doing really good work with that.
It's all really positive and very impressive. But what do you think you need to be better?
Oh, we can never rest on our laurels.
Yeah. But what, I'm asking you, what's your wish list?
Well, tonight's wish list will be different tomorrow. I mean, seriously.
If I would have, someone's gonna yell at me if I say it.
Go
I
ahead.
want more time with the recruits. I don't think 28 weeks is enough.
Yeah.
The recruits would probably tell me, but I don't think 28 weeks is enough. I don't know if I ever think enough time is enough, but I would like more time.
I wish, but this is across the nation, and this is just Dave Reed talking. I wish we had more officers. I wish I mean, what are we, 1.3 million people that live in the county? Probably another 500,000 that traverse the county to go government jobs. And we're right now hovering at around 1,000 officers. Because we're, I mean, almost 200 officers short. The amount of stress that puts on our, I mean, our municipalities are great. We have great working relationships with Maryland State Police, Rockville, Gaithersburg, everybody. But the stress that puts them on to do a job and to do it perfectly, because so much weight is put on their shoulders. Everything is analyzed. You know, after George Floyd, and I'll be very honest with you, you know, when I was in the Marines, one of my things was civil disturbance. And so as a sergeant, working actually for Chief Yamada and the Wheaton District, when they would have protests because of George Floyd, I would go out there and be in charge of that protest. So the first thing I would do is I would go to the organizers of the people there and I said, hey, I'm Sergeant Reed, you know, Montgomery County Police. Can I ask you why you're protesting? What's been your interaction with Montgomery County Police? Nobody ever had a negative reaction to Montgomery County Police. Well, this is what I saw on social media, so you're all bad. So we're in that one profession that, God forbid, somebody does something in Minneapolis, because we have this on our sleeve, we're all bad, and we're all just out to kill people. We can't fight social media. You know, I asked a reporter one time. I was up the entire week of the Baltimore riots, up in Baltimore, and I asked a reporter one time. I said, "Why do you guys always just focus on the negative? Bad news sells. How do you fight that?" And so what we try to do here, and try to give them that baseline of not just, you know, we're not just throwing butterflies at them. You know, this is the realization of this job. And so we try to prepare them every way we can. And it will never be enough. You could give us a year with them, and it will never be enough, because these instructors get to know the recruits. They become personally vested in them. They want to see them succeed. And it's like, because that's why we say we don't want to send a bad product out on the road, because we don't want them to fail. Because if they fail, our organization fails. Our organization fails, our community fails. So it can become very stressful on them too. So there's a lot involved.
Thank you for the answers.
I want to be respectful of the time. Are there any last questions? If anybody has additional questions, I'll stick around. I mean, not everybody's here, but I'll stick around. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to email me questions. If I don't have the answers, I'll make sure that I get them.
Does everybody have my email address too? It's david.reed@montgomerycountymd.gov. And again, please, you know, you may get home. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for coming. It was nice seeing you outside of
Question.
the floating house. Yeah. It was nice.
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
So are we okay? I'm gonna stop the
Yeah.
recording. All right. Thank you, everybody that
Thank you,
visited.
guys.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
So.